Welcome to the Data, AI, and Everything podcast, where we delve deep into the evolving world of data science and artificial intelligence. In each episode, we engage with leading experts and visionaries who are at the forefront of transforming the landscape of data and AI. Join us as we unravel the complexities and envision the future through the experiences and insights of our distinguished guest.
This is Data, AI, and Everything, and I am David Hardoon. And today I have the pleasure to speak with Donald McDonald, Head Group Data Office at OCBC Bank. Donald, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Hey, nice to be here, David. Thanks for the opportunity.
Now, we're going to go into this because obviously GenAI, and you've been recently in the press quite a bit, and I'm joking that we're almost in competition, seeing what's happening out there, but I've been loving it. All the news, the way it's been talked about. But before I kind of dive into this one, I have to ask, and it may be just me having a bad memory, but was there always an A in your surname? Because I've noticed that on LinkedIn. Was always a McDonald with an A?
Yeah, always.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm Scottish. So the Scottish tend to be McDonald. The Irish are McDonald. So that's how you tell the difference.
See? This is brilliant. I start the day straight away with learning something new. Thank you. See, I had to ask you that one. So swinging back to, actually, there's a couple of things I want to talk about, but let's start in reverse in terms of GenAI. What's this really about?
What is GenAI about?
No, really, what is it really about?
But for me, we've been doing AI for a long time. And historically, AI was about the left side of the brain, the rational decision making, the making basic predictions in banking around things like who's going to buy a home loan, who's going to leave the bank, who's going to make a complaint this month. That's been our bread and butter in AI and banking for the last 20 years, to be honest. Although we've gradually got better at doing it. For me, GenAI is opening up the right side of the brain, finally having an assistant, a tool that can help us with those more creative tasks, which frankly in the past AI couldn't do. And I think that unlocks a lot of new possibilities. In the past, we were in the back end helping business to achieve their tasks. But now the average business person understands what those AI guys in the corner are able to do. Finally, because they can see how it's going to transform their daily jobs. So I think it's a real game changer, both in terms of the capabilities we have, but in terms of the business's understanding of how we can help them now as well.
See, that's a really interesting way of putting it. And I honestly even haven't thought about that from that perspective, that it's a tool for creativity. It's really about unlocking the right side of the hemisphere. It's actually, you're very right on that point of view. If you think about AI fundamentally, it was really, that's the origin of it. It's about statistics. It's about the numbers. It's about the absolutes. And on one hand, that also is what I think, correct me if I'm wrong, also given the confidence of, okay, it's giving me that kind of statistical information. Now, in going down this path of introducing and creating almost a shift, it's transforming AI into a more creative tool. How do we now provide that degree of assurity, or in fact, maybe in the world of creativity, we don't actually need to provide a degree of assurity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do see, since the rise of GenAI in the last year, I wouldn't say the hype, but the amount of concerns being raised about the existential risks of AI, which weren't really being raised before, maybe because people thought AI was locked in this little statistical box where we had that assurity. With GenAI, obviously we know the gloves are off, and it can now come up with things that we can't control. But in some ways, creativity is about that. It's about not constraining things. We keep talking about hallucination being this terrible side effect of GenAI, but hallucination ultimately it's a feature, not a bug.
I love that. I'm gonna use that next time when someone says something funny.
Okay,
This is a feature, honestly.
It's a feature, not a bug, because you want it to be thinking outside the box. That's what creativity is. Obviously, there are certain situations where you don't want it to be too creative because you want to have an answer that's within a certain confidence range where you can be sure that it's correct. But even in those instances, I think in the last year, we've made great progress in trying to control these things. So obviously we can manage things like the temperature of the model. So how creative is it? We can obviously RAG is taking over. So rather than letting it crawl its entire knowledge base, we constrain where it's getting the answers from. But in OCBC, we've also introduced kind of post-processing guardrails. So if it's a use case where I need creativity, then I let the LLM run and it just comes up with the answers and you choose, is that a good answer? But if it's a use case where I need to give you an answer and it needs to be correct, then we do things like post-processing. If I'm letting a user search OCBC's knowledge base and they need to get an answer from one of our policy documents. Okay, we can't have hallucination then. I need to give you the right answer. So what we do is the LLM will give you the answer and then we do post-processing to say that answer that we've given you, does that document really exist in our knowledge base? And does that line, that answer exist inside that document?
Yeah.
So it's possible to do these kind of post-processing
Corroborations.
Yeah, exactly. So I think give it another 12 months to focus on these areas. I think we'll have even more robust solutions. But already I think we're able to control those things when we need to control it. We shouldn't always control it.
I'd love to hear a few more of kind of the examples of how they're used. But before going that, is something you said that just made me think that even if you go back to, and I find it weird saying the term traditional AI. It's like I'm forcing titles and acronyms, but still allow me to do that. For traditional AI, it's almost the case whereby we're constantly swinging between extremes, and and I'll explain what I mean by that. And that in the traditional AI with a statistical form, we were almost forcing it to resolve creative issues, process issues, quote unquote thinking. And I even remember early days, consultancy, et cetera. No, you can't just have a button that tells you everything to do. You really need to think about it. It's a means to provide you some statistical information. And now, if you think about literally how kind of the whole GenAI, LLMs, and the various forms of it started, where it really was, in fact, the beginning was more the audio, visual kind of stuff. It was full-blown creativity. It's like going nuts and seeing what will come out. And now everyone's going, oh no, but it has to be in a box. It has to be statistic. It seems like we're swinging sometimes between these two pendulums, and it goes back to the root of the question of, and I don't know if you've thought about this, of do we truly know what is it that we want, how and if to use it, or this is essentially the complexity and the difficulty of finding out is we're just constantly creating these new capabilities and we're trying to fit it somewhere.
Yeah, I don't think we know what we want. I agree with that. And I think we're going to end up with, like you say, it's a pendulum. There are many cases where we need to have absolute certainty. There's some in the middle where we're allowed a little bit of leeway, a bit of flexibility, and some on the right side, maybe in the industries like the creative side, where they have it completely unbound and they can do what they want. I think we'll end up having different tools and different kind of guardrails for each of those boxes of work. But I think at the moment, effectively, you've got people at the back end building these capabilities and us at the front saying, okay, where are we going to apply this? How are we going to use it? I don't think we know in many cases exactly what we want. And even when you speak to the business, I'm sure you're the same. We have now these toolboxes of great capabilities and we go and see the business, and the business also doesn't really know what they want with it. Sometimes it's show me a demo, give me access for months and I'll figure out what it can actually do. Then I'll tell you where I actually want to apply it. So I think everyone is in this frankly, really exciting time where the technology is advancing at a tremendous rate. And also the business mindset is also advancing at a tremendous rate. 3 years from now, it'd be amazing to see where we actually land. Because at the moment, there's so many balls in the air.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. In the end of the day, it's really about understanding the how it's going to be used and then applying the right process in place. And I want to give you actually, this is back, oh my God, nearly 5-6 years ago. I was talking with a insurer firm. It was a European-based one. And it was a whole conversation. And as you probably fondly recall during the conversations of feet in terms of part of the usage, and they were talking about the importance and the criticality of equity, gender equity in terms of providing premium. Right. And I remember asking them, why using AI then? Because if you have a certain amount of population, essentially that there needs to be a certain degree of equity from a premium perspective. I said, literally, it's math. You can just do the equation. You don't need it to predict. And he stared at me and goes, So it goes back to this thing of it shouldn't be just a hammer looking for everything to be a nail. It's about contextualizing it. And yeah, there could be certain areas, and I really like that you said it, that, go out, have creativity. There's some risks there. There are some challenges, as with anything in life. And there's some areas whereby you're saying, sorry, I don't want you to be creative. I want that boring, absolute black and white, like zero creativity. And it's finding that particular point and finding the means in using what we have in order to achieve that. And it sounds like that's exactly how the approach that you're ultimately implementing, that you're approaching it.
Yeah, I think it is. I think at OCBC, when we've been deploying GenAI, but first I would say 80% of our work is not GenAI. 80% of our work is still, as what you called it, traditional AI, analytical AI, as we call it, just because it sounds a bit nicer. That's still what most problems require, frankly, in the bank, where it's about efficiency, it's about certainty. Then when it comes to GenAI, we're splitting it in two ways. One, where we're building what we call general tools, which are designed to empower all 30,000 OCBC employees. So that would be things like OCBC GPT, where effectively we give them access to ChatGPT, unconstrained, so they can use it any way they want within the secure OCBC environment. Another example would be Buddy. So Buddy is our internal kind of search OCBC knowledge base, that 150,000 documents to find answers to the questions you need. So those are the generic tools that we make available to anyone. And because we're not pounding those into a specific UI, they're available through things like Microsoft Teams and through our staff app. Employees can use them any way they want. So you would be amazed how the 30,000 employees are using those things. So for us, those are creativity tools, because we're not telling them, here's the tool, here's the hammer, here's how you hit that nail.
Yeah.
You got a capability, you can use it any way you want. And they're doing amazing things. And then our other focus is then using generative AI for role-specific co-pilot. So in our IT side, for example, we have OCBC Wingman, which produces the code, allows you to debug, refactor, write the documentation, do the unit tests. We also have RN Copilot. We have the Contact Center Copilot. And they're very specific for those roles. We've looked how people are doing those jobs. How can AI make you more effective when you're doing your daily tasks? And so they're very constrained. I know what your process is, and using this tool, I'm going to make my process 20 or 30% better and take away the drudge work. But not a lot of flexibility for them to then experiment and do creative things. Whereas the horizontal, I think that's where we find out the creative ways that people use it. And then maybe we'll optimize that and turn that into a specific co-pilot for each of the jobs.
Obviously the audience can't see us, but I'm smiling here. And with a cheeky question as to, I was about to ask you about manpower and all the obvious questions and fears and concerns. And I'm wondering, given this focus that has been coming up with respect to creativity, I'm wondering, are the folks that are truly worried about GenAI are the ones who have actually realized that it's a creativity tool? And they're like, oh, we can't do that anymore. So or something that's really scaring us because that's going to take all the creativity away. So I'm wondering what has been, because if you have, what's 30,000, if I heard correctly, people in the bank, obviously speaking in the large communities, the realization of how this is helping in exploring ways in doing work. And in fact, when you're talking about IT, the first thing that popped in my mind, especially in banking, don't know if you guys have it, is COBOL. I think we need as many co-pilots as possible for the folks that are still using COBOL coding. That is.
COBOL's an interesting one though, because obviously, okay, you're slightly younger than me, but COBOL was the lifeblood of when I started in banking. And in the bank, especially when we go to some of the regions, we still have COBOL powering some of our mainframe systems there.
Yeah.
And we're currently going through a big project in, let's just say, Hong Kong, where we're modernizing the old system and we're moving it into a microservice-based architecture. But to do that, you've got to open up the old COBOL and understand how it works. And there are very few people left in the banks that understand. So we're finding that things like Wingman understands COBOL. So you can basically put the code in there, right-click it and say, what is this code doing? And it turns back the clock 40 years. Suddenly you understand what that COBOL's trying to achieve.
So exactly with these, not even anecdotal, these real and very concrete examples. What was it? Was there, don't have to dive into OCBC, but I'm just kind of really curious in the experience in terms of even outside of a fear or concern of, oh, AI is coming again to take our jobs, or like, how's it been?
At OCBC, we've been very clear that it's about augmenting the employees and not replacing the employees. Because if you look across any organization, frankly, you'll find people who are probably working late, people who are coming in at the weekends, people who are doing overtime. And so already there's a lot of fat there that can be trimmed down with generative AI. It's not about taking away the jobs. It's about making those jobs more efficient and making people work on things that they actually enjoy doing. So getting rid of the drudge work that you spend between 7 and 8 o'clock every night doing. So I think people appreciate that. Obviously, people are resistant or a bit concerned about what's this going to mean for my job in the future. And I think a great example would be Wingman. So again, and I keep bringing this one up, Wingman is the coding assistant. And when we rolled it out first, we gave it to the data scientists. And then we started rolling it out progressively across our IT organization. And if you're a coder and that's your profession, then you obviously think you are the best in the world at this. Why do I need a technology to help me do it? And so the take up initially was not that strong. So what we did was we did a hackathon where we invited 100 coders along. We gave them the same coding task. 50% were given Wingman, 50% weren't. And they'd had no training on Wingman, so this was completely new to them. And we gave them half an hour. And by the end of it, everyone who had Wingman was able to complete the task. And I think about 60% of the people without Wingman were able to complete it. But what was interesting was the fastest person to complete the task did it in less than 2 minutes. Whereas for the non-Wingman people, I think on average it was about 20. And that immediately created interest from the people without the tool. Because how did you do that? How is it possible you can do that task in 2 minutes? And then suddenly there was like a pull factor where people could see, okay, it makes me more efficient, but I can see that's making me 10 times more efficient. Teach me how to do that because I want to have 18 minutes spare in my day that I didn't have previously. So that's how we did it, was we created the demand. We showed them that, yes, this is better. We showed them that this is not going to replace your job. It's just going to allow you to do the work that you already have much, much faster. And after that, people were on board. And so what we're doing now is we're creating effectively a leaderboard. We've gamified these things. So we reward people for using Wingman and the amount of code that they accept through Wingman. There's a leaderboard so you can see where you rank versus the rest of the bank, and you're going to start earning merchandise. So you're going to have the Wingman jacket, for example, earn your stripes. They're trying to make it like a prestige thing as well. You are the Wingman.
Maybe this whole thing is really down to a question or effect of speed of change. That you're going from literally riding a horse to here's a Ferrari. They both take you there, but obviously in completely two different speeds. Again, I'm assuming that the road's there. And the reason I'm saying that is because I'm just recollecting, you mentioned you had COBOL. I'm remembering the days when I was still a student and I had to code. And my weapon of choice was MATLAB. I did my C++, but then was really, I was like coding in math and next and so forth. But even then, I had to write everything. When I talk about nowadays it's deep learning, all that, but then the good old term neural networks, your backpropagations, your regression algorithms, your optimization, your quadratic, I had to write every single line of code. And that meant doing a lot of debugging because sometimes mistakes happen. And now, even before with Wingman or other coding assistants, it's already libraries. And I every now and then I poke fun at, let's say, the more junior folks. I'm saying, you don't code, you just call libraries. But the end goal is the same, is you have an ability to expedite, accelerate, deliver quality. But at the same time, and that's actually what I personally encourage, is have an understanding and have an appreciation of going down to the deal. So a mechanic is like, you don't have to always build the car from scratch, but you understand the parts and how it works. So if you ever needed to, and you had the parts, you can do it essentially. So that's actually effectively, if I use the example of Wingman in your case, or other coding assistants or other assistants and productivity tools, and effectively what GenAI is, it just gave everyone this, maybe reference to COVID, massive booster shot and goes, hey, go. It's something that just give you like 100% efficiency. And people just like, whoa, hold on a second.
I agree. I've been talking about the coding assistant a lot, but I can see a number of other examples we have internally. We have things like document AI, policy QA, where in the past, if you're in the corporate banking space and your client wants to apply for a loan, you would ask them for tons and tons of documents. Give me your credit report, your financial statement, your sustainability report. And people would read these 100-page PDFs. They would find the relevant information, they'd copy and paste them out, put them into a Word document, and then submit the credit proposal. So today you can literally just drag and drop those kind of documents into a portal we built. The GenAI runs and pull out the clauses, it reformats into a nice format, and then puts it in the downstream table so we can use it in that credit proposal. Every time you're doing this, that's 30 minutes saved. So I definitely think that the productivity gains are there. The productivity gains are real. But I think that's the low-hanging fruit. I spoke at a conference last week, a panel of the economists event. And at the end, one of the questions I got from the floor was, do you think we're just using generative AI to make our current lives a little bit more efficient? And I agree with the question. At the moment, that is really where our biggest benefits are, taking away the drudge work. But I do think we are going to see transformational change coming from this because, okay, if you start chipping away at these inefficiencies, eventually we're going to get to that 4-day working week. And that to me is transformational for all of us. But I also think ultimately we're going to start to see it in areas like the interface. We spent the last 15 years tapping on our phones and using the app.
Yeah.
But GenAI is the thing that's going to basically create the natural language interface in future. The Joaquin Phoenix movie, what was it, Her? When you wake up in the morning and you're speaking to your natural assistant, what happened in the news last night? How should I rebalance my portfolio? GenAI is ultimately going to create that kind of thing, which is going to change the way that we interact with the universe. And the example I gave at the conference was my mother. My mother is 80 years old. She lives in the wilds of Scotland. And a few years from now, she's going to be on her own. My father's getting old. And the thought of her waking up in the morning and just having something that she can talk to, that understands her humor and can just yabber away and keep her happy. Those are the kind of things that I think generative AI is going to unlock in the next 2 to 3 years. Yeah, at the moment it's all about efficiency because that low-hanging fruit, one can grasp it. But it is truly transformational when we get to that.
In the end of the day, it's not even about Gen AI. Gen AI is an engine. Knowing marketing, seriously, I'm sure there'll be another name in 6 to 8 months from now, another year. But at the end of the day, it's about creating these engines that in combination with other pieces of the puzzle create, like you said, this transformative aspect. And there were 2 things I wanted to say. One, in terms of the making things a little better. I'm slowly coming to the view, I don't know whether it's a right or wrong one, that I don't think time save, if I say it that way, I don't think it's appreciated. I don't. There are organizations, obviously, there are people who do, but I think in a generalized statement, I don't think it's appreciated because if you go to an organization and say, hey, I can save you, or you can save whoever, yourself, for every single employee, an hour or 2 hours of their day. I'm doubtful many organizations will say like, oh, it's worth investing. It's spiritually, yeah, I love it. But actually when push comes to shove, again, general statement, I don't think many would say, okay, we're going to invest. We're going to put dollars or whatever currency you have in order to actually actualize on that save. So I also think it's a bit of I don't know if maturity is the right word, that we need to realize that, yeah, time saves, however simplistic one could put it, is worth it. If not only for the actual time save, but also for that opening of the possibility, because I can guarantee you what's going to happen in a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 from now. You're going to have those who have truly transformed, have created fundamental new capabilities and way of working internally as well as externally, it's engaging with customers, and those who haven't. And those who haven't are going to go, oh, wow, why have we done that? And it'll be literally a case of you didn't put the bedrocks, you didn't put the foundations, you did not think that it's worth your while. You only thought it's worth your while when you saw the end product, you saw the end of that underlying transformation.
Yeah, I get you. Like it's an hour a day doesn't sound exciting to a lot of people, but that's 17% probably of your employees' working day. So if I can make your company 17% more efficient, then that's $1 billion benefit.
On our end, because something that we did a while ago is, I'll surmise that we've helped the tax team. Not usually the folks that you think of helping on top of your mind. I think it was save about anything between 1,000 to 3,000 hours. And that is phenomenal. Like you said, it's giving someone to be more effective, efficient in the work and going home. Now that then opens these new opportunities of actually doing the more creative stuff, the more opportunistic, seeing how to create a business value. And ironically, I think that the so-called compliance side of the house are the ones which can really benefit. Because what's the usual complaint, especially in the banking world? It's compliance. You just see the world as black and white. That's because they have no time to do anything else. Everything has to be stopped. Last one. The other one I wanted to. So it's really interesting. You mentioned both Her, and there's been a couple of other movies. If you look at the Japanese culture, I already saw one which was really phenomenal, where they had a small 3D hologram, which they've already been starting to incorporate with some Gen AI capabilities to have a conversation, as you mentioned, in terms of opportunity from your mother. That is, on the one hand, that is a beautiful social opportunity. On the other hand, I'm a bit worried. I'll tell you why I'm a bit worried. Because if you look purely just even without the AI capabilities, like literally AI minus, one of the outcomes of social accessibility, the internet, is echo chambers. How I'm worried because would then that be like echo chamber on steroids, whereby it's literally, because sometimes the beauty of having a non-AI interaction, you and me, is you can go, David, I disagree. That no, go to the extreme side. That's stupid. It's to have that essence of a
It's a
discourse.
challenge.
Exactly. And I think we're already been less and less appreciating the value of discourse. So I'm just worried. Is that a risk that can happen? Is that it'll just be
Very fair point. But I think if someone is coding these things properly and they effectively have a personality of their own, the personality cannot be 100% yes man personality. They got to factor in that kind of, that little bit of grit where 1 in every 10 responses I'm pushing back. I mean, something bringing down.
think about it. The 3 rules of robotics. I could see with the 4th one being there's a requirement. It must be a little bit of an asshole. Because I can think on top of my head a few people that I know would definitely trade a yes man and yes woman.
Yeah, I guess it would pick up on your mood. Which days do you need a yes man to pep you up? And which days you need to be brought down a peg or two? I think really fascinating to see where it's going to go. The other one I was thinking of was, so it's going to help people like my mother or people living in the middle of nowhere where there's not a lot of social contact. But I was thinking of when I was young and you would go on a holiday with your father and you'd be driving in the car and you would see something out the window and you'd be like, hey, Dad, what's that? And Dad would probably make something up. He'd say, oh, that's a Russian actor. That's when you're young, you have no idea if he's speaking the truth or not. But I think in future, when again, these things get integrated into your glasses, for example, and you could just look at something and say, tell me what that is. How does it work? Where do I get one? How much does it cost? The role of fathers taking kids on holiday is going to fundamentally change because we're going to be able to call them out on their bullshit.
Yeah, I was about to say, but it's actually interesting you're saying that because in a way, a tool of creativity, in a way, has the risk of creating creativity because I was, as you were saying that, I'm going back and I'm like, oh my Lord, the amount of bullshit I got told, but it triggered imagination. It's looking at the sea. And I literally thought there was a plug in the bottom of it because the current went up and down.
Oh.
But it was that imagination that triggered the curiosity to understand, is it really a plug? And then you go, no, it's the moon. So it's actually, this is fascinating because maybe amongst all these conversation about regulation, policy, it's now, I'm loving this because it's actually, we're learning more about ourselves. And it's almost forcing us to have a better understanding and appreciation of what we are. And in how do we make sure we perpetuate creativity? How do we perpetuate in imagination? How do we perpetuate ingenuity? And part of that is you just sometimes I'm going to go out and say it. It's like you need hallucinations.
Yeah, definitely. I'm all for that. And I think that's one of the areas that we're probably not harnessing with this technology at the moment. We are very much focusing on those making current things a little bit better and we get worried when it hallucinates. But if you want to have great art, if you want to come out with breakthrough ideas, then we've got to unleash the hallucination. And so I really look forward to us doing more of that in the future.
No, absolutely. And in fact, I remember when this first kind of hit the news press, what was it, towards the end of the previous year. I keep on saying last year, but we're already in 2024. And literally my closest friend, she's a teacher. And I remember I got a message from her and she was freaking out. And it's like, oh, this is going to take all our jobs and all this. And I was like, no, you're looking at the wrong way. Right now, if you look at it, again, overgeneralizing, but look at the educational system, you're being told how to pass exams. And that's one of the reasons I hated school because it's like, why am I going there? It's just, I have a book. Thank you. I can just read it. It's now giving that freedom in my mind and time for teachers to teach good old Montessori, where it's got go out in the field. It's think about it, be challenged, asking questions. It's not just, okay, this is how you solve it and this is how you get the results. This one, you can have the assistant to provide that information. And that requires a change and adoption of more creativity. How do you trigger that creativity? In her case, it was obviously the kids, but also in ourselves. So when you come and say, David, I'm going to go back to your coding assistant. I'm like, and actually, this is really fascinating. It brings me back to uni, where we used to have competitions on not only who could code the faster, but who can find the most optimal way to code it. And sometimes you would see the ways in which some of my friends and colleagues in uni would code, and you're like, wow, where did you think of that? And a lot of it was just creativity. I said, I thought I'll try it. I'll just completely in a way that intuitively or instinctively you're like, oh, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I get it. But in future with these kind of tools, and because you've got the natural language interface, the ability as a student to go deeper on the fly without the teacher being there, I think that's going to be the amazing thing. It's like you're okay. In your example there, I'll write my code. Tell me how my code could be faster. How could I? Why is his code better than my code? Is there any way I could write this code so I only take 10 lines rather than 20 lines? And having the stuff tell you there and then, and you go deeper on the fly and ask the questions and interact. Having your own personalized teacher, I think that's amazing. But I do get though how some of the creative industries are threatened by it. I've had a few sessions with journalists, and obviously they spend their entire lives writing these articles. And here they are suddenly being given a system and being told to use the system that is effectively taking away what they think their special skill is. And I can understand there why there is a fear. But again, to me, it's find out where it can augment you. Your special skill is that you have a very particular turn of phrase. Okay, get the engine to do the basic stuff, the grunt work, the things that you don't enjoy doing, the sports reports or the court appearance type stuff. And you spend more time working on those deeper exposés, where you really get to shine. So I think it's, where do you find the balance?
You said something there, and that's why I was jumping in, which I can't emphasize enough how important it is. And in fact, thinking about journalists, again, I understand the concerns, I understand the fears. It's there, it's real. One should not undermine them. Yeah. But even more important for them is ask the questions. You said it there. It gives you the capacity, and you need to think about the questions to ask. The thing about these type of assistance tools, it doesn't ask the questions for you. It can't ask the questions for you. It can give you the means, it can give you the capacity, it can give you the capabilities to answer them, to approach them, to look at them. But you now suddenly have this latitude to really think on what is it that I want? What is the question that I'm actually after? And that to me is something which, again, if you go to the, you called it analytical AI, traditional AI, whatever terms, what is the biggest failings in successfully implementing AI? Is you got the wrong question, or you don't even get the question.
Yeah.
What is sometimes the biggest issue when you read an article and you go, it's because it's not really answering an interest. It's not exploring a sufficiently juicy questions. Those are ones, if you think of those exposés, it's because it went to something that is wow. So it wasn't actually just the writing per se. Obviously, that plays an important role. Don't get me wrong. But it's the heart of what it's trying to address. And this, to me, personally, whether it's traditional AI or generative AI, which is leading and providing tools, it is giving us this phenomenal freedom to ask questions and read this. Again, let us be boringly statistic. Prompt engineering. What is prompt engineering? It's an entire field, it's an entire discipline, an entire job and occupation on how to ask questions. So I like to jokingly say, finally, people who did philosophy have a job. No kidding.
Yeah, but my view on prompt engineer, obviously last year when GPT took off, everyone was saying prompt engineer is the job of the future. My view is no, it's not. I think AI is going to take that job. Because if you look at libraries like, DSPY and things, already DSPY can automatically tell you this is the optimal prompt for you, statistically figuring out what's the best combination of words. So I do think those kind of jobs are a short-term thing, will evolve beyond that quite quickly. But coming to your point on AI, GenAI not being able to ask the question, it's actually one of the areas that we use it. Like, for example, in our chatbots in the contact center, we're still not brave enough to put an LLM directly facing the customers because of the challenges there of prompt injection and things. Instead, what we do is we give the knowledge to the LLM and we say, what are the questions that someone might ask against this knowledge base? And so basically the LLM is figuring out, well, these are the top 5,000 questions that a customer may ask. And then we load those into the chatbot. So it can figure out, based on a body of knowledge, what are the right questions to ask against this bot.
But notice what you said there. It analyzes the question the customers ask and it says, what is the most likely one? So now essentially providing a recommendation. So I'm smiling because one of the biggest problems I always have, let's say when you search information, is how, like you said, prompt engineering. How do you phrase it in a way that I will get what I'm looking for? But it's still me that needs to go, look, I'm looking for this. And I say, hey, David, this is what you're looking for. Is this what you're looking for? Is this the question you're trying to ask? I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to ask. Boom. It's an aided tool, but this is why I get super excited, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. That, and it brings back to, again, I keep on going back to my uni days. And when I spent a lot of time thinking, it's like I was paid to think. It's like, oh, good old days. Is what is it that we're looking for? What is it I'm trying to do? What is it that we're trying to explore? What is it that we're trying to address? What is the real heart of the problem? It's these kind of existential, perhaps, if I go down that path, questions. Like when we discussed earlier about the avatar, what does that now suddenly mean to human interaction and social construct? How do we go about putting the safeguards? I honestly believe that maybe in 100, 200, 300 years from now, people will look back and, okay, I don't want to be as bold as call it as looking at it as the Renaissance of our era, but at the lack of a better analogy, people will look back and look at the Renaissance of this era, because we are at that tipping point of a fundamental shift, which I believe, and feel free to give me your perspective if you disagree on this or agree, is we're not quite sure what it is. And as anyone, when you're at a tipping point of something, you don't know what's there. You only know it's when you pass it. But we are at it. And that's also adding to our concerns. It's adding to our fears. Is it going to be a good thing? Is it going to be a bad thing? Is it going to be the end of humanity? As some may say. But put all this together, we are at a phenomenal shift. From the 19th century, my grandmother, when she was born, 1910, no electricity. She was in London, horse and carriage. To the end of the 19th century, she passed away in what was it, 2000, just past 2000 essentially, where internet and this, and she was learning stuff online. Most amazing woman that, one of the most amazing that I've dealt with, is constantly learning, to want to be personal flights to space with creative tools. It's a shift.
Yeah, totally agree. I don't know if it's going to take us 200 or 300 years to recognize it. I think obviously the speed we're going will be much faster than that. But yeah, we're getting to the point where AI and medicine together are going to help us proactively cure a lot of those diseases that have been plaguing us here for the last 200 years. Quantum computing is going to transform our ability to solve problems. Space travel, I'm also very bullish on space travel. We read too many sci-fi books, clearly. But yeah, I think 100 years from now, we'll look back and this kind of 20, 30-year period is really, I think, the next inflection point where we go to the next level. So super excited to see it, even though probably not going to be able to look back on it and say, maybe that's the other one, longevity. Maybe I will be old enough back on it and see that inflection point. Because I also feel the way that medicine is going, we will live to 120, 130. I'm pretty bullish on.
I won't be surprised. It's about unlocking knowledge. And look, even with, if you saw recent the movie, and obviously the books and the history behind it, Eisenhower, the atomic bomb. Look, anything, that's the beauty of humanity and also the downside sometimes of humanity. We can use anything for good or bad. Ultimately, it's down to how we choose to leverage it. In fact, we're part of the group that we're formed. We have power plants, and I'm now pretty much convinced if we want to solve energy problem while having it green, nuclear. I'm just convinced. But obviously, that took a long time and a journey associated. So I'm just swinging back to, yes, there are risks. Yes, there are things that may go a bit bump in the night. But at the end of the day, that's where we need to reflect and see how we use it. And if I back to the AI element, is also realize not only how to use it, but the right context in which it should be used, if at all. It's perfectly fine. Say, if you want to go to the countryside and just enjoy the peace and tranquilities, you don't have gadgets. That's what some people go hiking. when you do want to have the ability and the fast pacing and get work done, is you have those tools. We need to know it's not an all or nothing. It's a contextual game.
Mm.
Donald, we can and we will keep on going in this, but just to bring clues, I just want to surmise it with maybe a combined terms of what we were saying, that GenAI, ultimately, it's a creative mechanism. So I'm going to call it that we're effectively creating a statistically creative tool. And it's now a realization, and I think we are, based on some of the stuff that you already shared, that you're doing, others are doing, are kind of really figuring out how to help bring the best out of us.
Yeah. By making us a better us.
There it is. With that, Donald, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Really enjoyed it, David.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Data, AI, and Everything podcast. Make sure you visit our website at aboitizdatainnovation.com, where you can subscribe to the podcast and find our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please share on your social channels as well.